Hi, I'm Amanda Jane Woodall and welcome to my fashion school. Dickensian poet or dangerous attention seeker. Today we take a look at an artist who experimented with his own mind, body and soul in a distinctly British musical encounter. It's Pete Doherty. Pete Doherty had a very comfortable childhood, growing up with parents who were social climbers. His dad achieved the rank of Sergeant Major in the military, and his mother was a military nurse turned public school matron. And the family had done their very best to leave their working class roots behind, but Pete felt very stifled by the life in the barracks because he was surrounded by barbed wire, assault courses, and was expected to adhere to a very strict code of conduct. He was highly intelligent, although not very studious, and achieved really impressive grades at his GCSEs and was expected to be a very successful person. He had a sensitive and creative side and enjoyed writing and reading poetry at an award-winning level. And on the weekends, he would go to the football with his dad, and he really enjoyed the camaraderie and was inspired by the chanting crowds. He secured a university place in London and took it upon himself to escape army life. He went to read literature, but he struggled to conform in his first year and ended up leaving and spending more time writing songs with his good friend Carl Barat. And in 1997, they formed the Libertines. Pete had been inspired by the Stone Roses and the Smiths to learn to play guitar. And although the pair, they weren't very confident in their abilities and sometimes they had a fractious relationship, they really started to believe in their vision for the music. The pair had a lot of talent for writing lyrics and they were able to move and connect a crowd. And this was very ironic because Pete himself struggled with loneliness, isolation and depressive thoughts, which meant that heroin was actually a big problem in the band because Pete was a heavy user and he wasn't very discreet about it. So it kind of became central to his character as the fans would live out their debauched rock and roll fantasies through Pete. Carl and Pete started to become more visible in the media as they were invited onto TV shows like The Jonathan Ross Show and Top of the Pops. And alongside bassist John Hassell and drummer Gary Powell, the band and their gigs started to rise in popularity. The band had some commercial success with 2 top 10 singles, including their anthem, Can't Stand Me Now, reaching number 2 in 2004. And in that same year, their self-titled album reached the number 1 spot. Sadly, the unity of the band started to suffer as Carl could no longer make things work with Pete's addiction, and Pete was forced out of the band in 2003 after receiving a short-term prison sentence for breaking and entering into Carl's home while the band toured Japan without him. Pete was devastated, and being in a bad way mentally, he shaved his head and he began doing petty thefts to support his habit, and also began to hang around a notorious London den. And the inhabitants of this home, they would later be caught up in a conspiracy of murder when in 2006 actor Mark Blanco fell to his death. And Pete and his friends were caught on CCTV fleeing the scene. Even in this state of self-sabotage, Pete still found the beauty in his broken life and wrote songs about it. And slowly he started getting his life back together. He made friends just as talented as he was. And these were guitarist Mick Whitnell, bassist Drew McConnell and drummer Adam Fisek. And the group formed Babyshambles. Babyshambles embraced British culture and they incited British kids to be proud of where they came from. And this saw them gain many fans and their gigs were very legendary around London. They charted 4 top 10 singles, their biggest hit being F Forever in 2005, and they had a top 5 album in 2007 called Shotter's Nation. The media would hype up his relationship with supermodel Kate Moss, and this was because they were both controversial figures. Kate Moss was seen as the face of heroin chic in the 90s, and Pete was now the new star of 2000s indie hedonism. The pair defined noughties fashion, namely festival fashion, when they appeared together at Glastonbury looking glamorously worse for wear and covered in mud, and these images went viral before the creation of social media. Pete's look also inspired high fashion. When Hedi Slimane based his collection Dior Homme Fall-Winter 2005 and 6 on Pete's very iconic look, he featured scruffy tailoring, oversized scarves and hats and dangly jewellery, and featured models with dark sunken eyes, bedraggled hair and a rock and roll stomp. By 2008, his excessive drug use and fame was starting to really take a toll on Babyshambles, because Pete was sentenced yet again to 14 weeks in prison due to drink and drug offences and breaching probation. And so they had to cancel many gigs, and this left a lot of fans feeling kind of screwed over. It was now speculated that Pete was on the brink, and many feared that he would join the ill-fated 27 Club. And so the courts ordered that Pete could either spend more time in jail or he could go and get an opiate blocker implant. And so he was flown to Portugal to receive this surgery, and he says it was very barbaric and that he felt like a test subject. In 2010, the Libertines reformed, and they were set to play their first 2 gigs since their 6-year hiatus, and Pete was invited to play with them in the gigs at the Leeds and Reading Festival, and they appeared to have a renewed love and romanticism for each other and their music. However, the press, they couldn't let things go, and they continued to humiliate Pete, bringing up the past and talking about his wild behaviours. Pete felt such an emotional toll from the much loved and well-received event, because he was living in squalor in his Marlborough home, he was in active addiction, and he was acting very dangerously and erratically. And in an incident where his documentary maker unfortunately passed away from an overdose, he actually was investigated and sentenced once again to 6 weeks in jail for possession. On his release, he discovered the Rehabilitation and Therapy Centre in Thailand, and so he decided to curate and sell his artworks and memorabilia at auction. And one piece, which was a painting of him and Amy Winehouse, fetched £35,000 at the auction, and this led Pete to admit that the pair had been in a relationship prior to her passing in 2011. He said that Amy was cruel and critical of his musical ability and that he could never really fully win her over. But he dedicated a song to Amy in 2015 to raise funds for the Amy Winehouse Foundation. In 2015, Pete successfully completed his rehabilitation, and to support him and to celebrate, the band The Libertines flew out to record their new album, Anthems Doomed for Youth. And so the band still tour together, they're still gigging, and they are a collective to this day. And in 2024, they reached the #1 spot again with their album, All Quiet on the Eastern Esplanade. And currently, Pete seems to have surrendered to a quieter life, living in a remote part of France with his filmmaker wife, Katia Davidas, their young daughter and their animals. Pete Doherty is a highly acclaimed, talented lyricist who wrote poetry about modern life and excess and was hounded by the British tabloids nearly to death? Or is he just a naughty British schoolboy who doesn't want to grow up?